My name is Faye Joager. I am 33 years old. One October night I was standing in my kitchen in Colorado, waiting for a kettle to boil, when the phone I'd kept quiet for 6 years began to light up and would not stop. For 6 years my family never called me. Not on my birthday, not once. Then in a single hour my sister and my mother and people I hadn't spoken to since I was 27 called me 89 times. They didn't call when I was drowning, they called when I could swim, but the calls weren't the strange part. The strange part was what my sister found the hour before they started, and what I did after. To understand why I left, you'd have to sit at our kitchen table when I was a kid. My father, Wade, was an electrician, hands like tool leather, a man who believed feelings were a luxury for people who hadn't worked a real day. My mother, Marlene, kept the peace by keeping score, and me, I was the one who could handle things. That was my label. Not the pretty one, not the smart one, the one who could handle it. I paid the light bill at 16 with money from bagging groceries, because the disconnection notice came and nobody else would look at it. At 19, I drove my father to a clinic to dry out and sat in the parking lot for 6 hours because he didn't want to go in alone but didn't want me inside either. When the transmission died, I found the money. When Grandma fell, I made the calls. My sister, Colleen, 3 years older, got to just be a person in that house. She was allowed to be tired, to be moody, to need things. I was the one things were needed from. And here's the part that took me years of therapy to say out loud without flinching. I liked it. I was proud of being the one who could handle it because being useful was the only currency that ever bought me a kind word in that house. Love came with a job description, and the job was mine. Nobody ever sat me down and said it. They didn't have to. I learned it the way you learn a language before you even know it's a language. Which is why when I finally couldn't do the job anymore, it felt less like leaving a family and more like quitting a position no one would let me resign from. The thing that finally broke it was a loan. 6 years ago my father lost his union job when the shop closed, and the family plan arrived at without me in the room. I would cosign a large loan against the house and defer my nursing program a year to move home and manage things. Manage, always that word. I was 27. I had clawed my way into that program off 2 jobs and a scholarship, and it was the first thing in my life that was only mine. I said no, I said it quietly in that same kitchen, and I remember the exact temperature of the silence that followed. My mother cried, my father didn't look at me, and Colleen said the thing that told me everything, after everything this family did for you. As if I'd been a charity case and not the one holding the roof up since 16. Within a week the story had set like concrete. Faye is selfish. Faye thinks she's better than us. Faye abandoned her dying parents to go play nurse. I didn't fight the story. That's the part people don't understand. I could have argued, sent long messages, tried to make them see me. I'd tried that my whole life. Instead, I did the one thing that had never been allowed. I left. And I did it without drama, and I stayed gone. No door slammed. I just stopped answering, moved 1,000 miles away, and let the silence they'd taught me work in both directions for once. That quiet was what made them furious, more than any shouting could have. Because a screaming daughter is still yours. A calm one who simply walks out has decided you're not worth the fight. I decided that at 27. It took me until this October to find out if I still believed it. So back to the kitchen, the kettle. That October night the first thing that came was not a call. It was a text from a number I had blocked years ago and in some weak-hearted week unblocked and never blocked again. Colleen, my sister. I knew the number the way you know an old scar. There was no hello. No, it's been a while. No, how are you? There was a link, just a link, blue and cold, sitting there under her name like a summons. I didn't open it. I want credit for that at least. I looked at that link for a while before I touched it, and while I was looking something odd happened. I still had one foot in the old world. I'd never left the family group chat. I'd muted it and hidden it years ago, but I was still in it, a ghost in the corner. That night, out of some instinct, I opened it. It was going off. Dozens of messages stacked up in the last 20 minutes. My mother and my aunts and Colleen typing over each other. I couldn't see what they were saying. They'd started a new thread I wasn't on, but I could see the old one alive, churning. And then, as I watched, it stopped. All at once the dots vanished. The churn went still. A chat that had been boiling for 20 minutes went dead silent, mid-sentence, like a room where someone had just walked in and said something that made everyone shut their mouths. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, kettle screaming now, staring at that sudden stillness. And I felt the first cold finger of dread. Something had happened, something big enough to silence a family that never stopped talking. And the only clue I had was one blue link I hadn't opened yet. I opened it, of course I opened it. The link went to a newspaper website, a regional paper back home, And the page that loaded was an article about a hospice program in rural Colorado. And the woman in the photo in scrubs, smiling that tired professional smile, was me. My name in the headline, my award, my face staring back at me from my sister's text message. She hadn't written a single word to go with it. She didn't need to. I understood the whole thing in one breath. Colleen hadn't gone looking for me because she missed me. She hadn't typed my name into a search bar out of love, wondering how her little sister was, hoping I was okay. She had been looking for something and she'd found me, and what she'd found was not a sister. It was a resource, a hospice nurse, an award winner, a woman with a steady job, and the article helpfully mentioned a role building end-of-life care programs. Whatever was happening back in that house, they had a problem, and they just discovered that the daughter they had erased was conveniently the exact solution to it. That's why the group chat went silent. For 6 years they'd told each other a story about me, selfish, failed, cold Faye who ran off to play nurse, and that article had just detonated the story. You cannot call a woman a failure while looking at her award. So they went quiet, all of them at once, to rewrite me in real time from villain into asset. I set the phone down, it was still warm in my hand, and then right there on the counter, face up now, it began to ring. Not a text this time, a call. Then before I could even reach for it, a second one stacking behind the first. I did not answer. I stood in my kitchen and I let it ring, and I watched the little counter on the screen climb. My mother, an unknown local number, my Aunt Deb, another unknown, Colleen again. Someone labelled only as a town exchange I recognised from childhood. They came in waves, a call ending and another beginning before the screen could even settle. Voicemails stacking up like planes I refused to let land. Adam, my partner, came into the kitchen because I'd let the kettle scream. He's a calm man, my Adam. He took it off the burner without a word and looked at me, looking at my phone, and he said, "Who is it?" I said, "My sister." He knows what that means for me, so he didn't say anything cheerful. He just leaned against the counter and waited. The counter passed a dozen, past 30, past 50. Adam finally said, "Faye, what is going on?" And I said, "I don't know yet," because I truly didn't. Nobody had told me anything. That's the part that still amazes me looking back. 89 times my phone rang in that 1 hour, my family reaching for me with both hands across 6 years of silence. And not one of them, not in a single voicemail, led with why. Not one said, "We're so sorry, we've missed you. Here is what's wrong." The calls were not an apology arriving late. They were a demand arriving early. I could feel it in the rhythm of them. Insistent, entitled. The way you pound on a door you're sure should open for you. Somewhere in the stack was the actual emergency. The real thing that had set all this in motion, and I would have to dig for it like it was my job to earn the explanation. 89 calls, and not one of them was "I'm sorry." I finally turned the ringer off, not because I'd decided anything, but because I couldn't think with a phone screaming that the whole family loved me now that I was useful. I played my mother's voicemail on speaker, standing very still, the way you brace before a cold shower. Her voice came out older than I remembered, wet at the edges. She said my name twice like a woman testing whether a bridge would hold. Then she got to it. My father had cancer, pancreatic. They'd found it late, the way it's almost always found late, and there was no fixing it, only counting it. And the counting was already down to weeks, maybe a few. That landed in me somewhere deep and old, and I had to put a hand on the counter. But it was the next part that told me exactly where I stood. 6 years and 1 diagnosis later, my mother did not say, "We want you home." She did not say, "Your father is asking for you," or "We were wrong," or "Please." What she said in a voice sliding from grief into something more practical was this: "You're a hospice nurse now, honey. You know what to do. You need to come home and handle this." Handle it, there it was, the oldest word in my whole life. The one I'd driven 2 states and 6 years to escape, waiting for me in my mother's mouth like it had never left. They didn't want their daughter back. They'd found a nurse, a free one, who happened to share their last name, who happened to owe them. Or so the story went. My father was dying, which was real and terrible and true. And in the same breath my family had looked at that dying and thought, "Faye can manage this for us." I set the phone down. Adam was watching my face. "What do they want?" he asked. I said, "They want me to work my father's death for free." And the awful thing was, some part of me already wanted to go. When the phone rang again and it was Colleen, I made my first mistake. I answered, I don't fully know why. Maybe because she was the one who'd found me. The one who'd fired the shot that started all this. Maybe because some 16-year-old still lived in me who wanted her big sister to say she was glad to hear my voice. She didn't. There was no hello. She came out swinging the way she always had, like the best defense against her own guilt was to get to anger first. So she said, "You're alive. Nice of you to pick up. 6 years, Faye, and it takes Dad dying to get you on the phone." I didn't answer, which made her louder. Behind her voice I could hear things, a suction machine, that wet mechanical rasp I know from 100 bedsides, and the low drone of a hospital bed motor. She was in the room with it already. She'd been in the room with it for weeks. And into my silence she dropped the line I would carry the rest of my life. The sentence that was really the whole argument between us, the whole war between two ways of seeing a family. Family, she said, isn't something you get to quit. She meant it like a fact, like gravity, like I'd broken a law of nature by leaving and now nature was collecting. Here's what I understood, standing in my quiet kitchen with my sister's exhaustion crackling down the line. This was not a reconciliation. Nobody on that end of the phone had spent this month missing me. They'd spent it drowning. And then they'd found a life raft with my face on it. I said carefully, I need to think. Colleen laughed, short and bitter. Think, she said. Right, you do that, he doesn't have time for you to think. And she hung up on me. That night I said no, not to her she'd hung up, but to the pool. I said it to Adam and to the dark ceiling and to the 16-year-old in me who'd never once been allowed to sit down. I said, I am not going to sprint toward that house the second they pull the alarm. I've done that my whole life. I did it at 16 with the light bill, and at 19 in that parking lot, and at 26 with the transmission, and every single time it taught them the same lesson, that Faye comes when called. That Faye handles it. That Faye's love is a thing you can summon by needing her badly enough. If I got on a plane tonight out of guilt, out of that old reflex, I would be proving the whole ugly thesis of my childhood true. Adam held my hand and said, you don't owe them your body and your job and your peace. You know that, right? And I said I knew it. But knowing a thing in your head and feeling it in the part of you that was trained since birth are two different countries, and I was standing with one foot in each. Because here's what kept me up staring at that ceiling long after Adam's breathing went slow beside me. I know exactly what a bad death looks like. I know what happens in a house where a man is dying and nobody knows how to read his pain. Nobody knows the difference between agitation and the medicine wearing off. Nobody knows to turn the lights down and lower their voices near the end. I could hang up on my sister. I found that night that I could not hang up on what I knew. I booked a flight, but listen to how I booked it, because this is the part I need you to hold on to for everything that comes after. I did not buy a one-way ticket. I did not buy the open-ended kind, the kind that says I'll stay as long as you need me. I bought a round trip, and I chose the return date on purpose, 19 days out. And I sat there and looked at it and did not let myself blur it into we'll see. I even printed the boarding pass, the physical paper kind, and I folded it and put it in the inside pocket of my coat over my chest where I could feel the edge of it. To anyone else, it was a piece of paper. To me, it was a sentence written down where I couldn't argue with it. I am coming as a nurse and nurses go home. I am not moving back. I am not dissolving into that house. There is a day already chosen when I leave, and it does not depend on how much they need me or how loudly or how sad it is. Adam watched me fold it into my coat, and he understood because he spent 6 years learning who I am. I said to him, and I meant it as a promise and a test both, if they try to make me cancel this flight, if they come at this ticket, that's how I'll know I was right to leave in the first place. He asked what I meant. I said they don't want me, they want the nurse who will never leave. This ticket is the one thing they can't stand because it has an ending on it. Watch, they'll go for it. I flew back 2 days later. Colorado to Ohio, a couple of hours in the air over a country that got flatter and greyer as I went. The mountains giving way to the fields I grew up hatting for how far they let you see and how little there was to see. Somewhere over Kansas I put my hand on my coat, felt the edge of the boarding pass and said the truest thing I knew to myself, quiet so the man in the next seat couldn't hear. They didn't call when I was drowning. They called when I could swim. I said it like a nurse checks a dose. To stay clear, to stay clean, because I had a plan, and the plan was a good one built out of everything my trade had taught me. When you walk into a dying stranger's house, you care for the patient and you do not let the patient's family run you. Grief makes people demanding and unfair and cruel. And a good hospice nurse learns to absorb that without taking it home, to stay kind and stay bounded at the same time. That was going to be my whole strategy. I was going to walk into my father's house and treat it like any other case. Wade was the patient. Marlene and Colleen were the patient's family. Difficult ones, sure, but I've handled difficult ones. I'd keep my professional distance the way I keep it every day of my working life. And in 19 days, I'd fly home to the life I'd built, having done a hard good thing for a dying man without losing an inch of myself. It's a good rule, it really is. It works beautifully on strangers. I was about to find out it does not hold on your own blood. Colleen picked me up at the airport, and the first thing she did was hug me. It was a long hug, a performance of a hug, the kind you give when you know people might be watching, or when you're trying to convince yourself of something. Over her shoulder I could see how much older she looked, how grey she'd gone at the temples at 36, how the exhaustion had carved itself into her. I almost softened right there. Then she let go and we got in the car. And before we were even out of the parking garage, the briefing began. That's the only word for it. It wasn't "how are you?" or "thank you for coming." It was logistics delivered fast, like she'd been saving it up. "Mom's a wreck, she can't do the nights anymore. The hospital bed's set up in the front room. There's a stack of bills you should look at. I put you in your old room. Figured that made sense since you'll be here a while." Since you'll be here a while, I noticed that, I noticed all of it. She had my 19 days rounded up to a while before I'd even set down my bag. She had a room assigned, a role assigned, a length of stay assumed. She wasn't picking up a sister at the airport. She was receiving a transfer. Taking delivery of a resource that had finally arrived. I sat in the passenger seat of my sister's car, watching the town I grew up in slide by unchanged, and I put my hand flat against my coat and felt the boarding pass under it, the edge of that folded paper with its date on it. And I thought 19 days, not a while, 19 days, and then I go home. I didn't say it out loud, not yet, but I pressed my hand against the paper and it held. House was exactly the same, and that's its own kind of violence, how a place can stay identical while it wrecked you and then just wait for you unchanged like nothing happened. Same screen door with the same tired spring, same smell, coffee and dust and something underneath it I never had a name for that just means childhood and dread in the same breath. I stepped inside, and the fourth stair creaked when Colleen went up with my bag, the exact same note it made when I was 9 and sneaking down for water. My mother came out of the kitchen and she was smaller than I remembered, and she took my face in both her hands and cried, and for 1 second it was almost what a homecoming is supposed to be, for 1 second. Then, with my face still in her hands and the tears still wet, she said it. "Oh, Faye, thank God, can you move back? I can't do this anymore, I can't, I need you here." Not "I've missed you," not "I'm sorry." The third sentence out of her mouth before I'd taken off my coat was already the ask. Already the whole question of my life laid on me at the door like a coat they wanted me to wear. Move back, take it over, be the one who handles it. I stood there in the entryway with my sister's footsteps overhead and my mother's hands on my face. And from the front room, a sound I knew in my bones. The slow, laboured, wet rhythm of a person breathing near the end of breathing. My father, 20 feet away behind a door I could see the edge of. I had sworn at 27 that I would never walk back through this house again. And now here I was, coat still on, my hand already reaching for the front room door. I opened the door and there was my father. Wade Georgia, who I had last seen standing in a kitchen refusing to look at me, a man built like the poles he used to climb, was gone. In his place, in a rented hospital bed shoved against the wall where the couch used to be, was a small yellow man drowning slowly in his own body. Pancreatic cancer does that. It takes the colour first, then the flesh, then the strength, and leaves the eyes for last. So the person is still in there, watching themselves disappear. His eyes moved to me. There was a long moment where neither of us said anything, and every good and terrible thing between us was in that room. And I let myself hope. I'm ashamed of it. But I let myself hope that the first thing my dying father said to his estranged daughter after 6 years would be something, anything, my name. Even what he said in a voice like paper tearing was, "You came good, your sister's been doing it wrong." That was it, that was the reunion. Even now, even here at the very end, I was not a daughter who'd come home. I was a competent person who'd finally shown up to fix the incompetent work of the others. He didn't need me, he needed me to manage. The reflex in me flinched toward her, and then before I could even decide to, my hands were already moving, because that's the other thing my trade did to me, it lives below thought now. I crossed the room and I took his wrist between my fingers the way I've taken 100 wrists to feel his pulse, and it was thready and too fast, and his skin was papery and cool. And the second my fingers closed on his wrist, I knew I had crossed a line I could not uncross. I had sworn never to touch this family again, and here I was, holding my father's dying pulse in my hand. There was no going back to the woman who'd walked in the door. So I went to work because that I know how to do. Within an hour I'd read his chart, called his oncologist's office and found the first problem. His pain medication was scheduled all wrong. Big gaps where the dose wore off and left him climbing the walls, which is why Colleen had been fighting a thrashing, frightened man for a week and thinking that was just how dying looked. It isn't. I fixed the schedule. I showed Colleen how to turn him without hurting his back, how to swab his mouth, how to read his face for pain when he couldn't say it anymore. By that night the front room was quieter than it had been in weeks. He slept. He actually slept without moaning, and my mother stood in the doorway and watched him rest and cried again. And I let myself feel for about 10 minutes the clean good feeling of having made a terrible thing a little less terrible. 10 minutes. Then it curdled the way it always did in that house into something that had teeth, because the family's response to my competence was not gratitude. It was appetite. "See," my mother said to Colleen, not quietly, "I told you only Faye can do this." And then turning to me in the same breath, no gap at all, "So you'll stay. Obviously you'll stay. We can't do this without you now." There it was, my skill wasn't a gift I was giving. It was evidence being entered against me. Look how good she is at it. Therefore she must do it. Therefore she must stay. The better I was, the tighter the trap. I understood, standing in that quieted room I'd just made bearable, that I had walked into a machine, and the machine ran on exactly one fuel, and the fuel was me being too good at handling things to be allowed to leave. It got clearer the next morning, and clearer isn't the same as better. My mother came to me while I was making coffee in my own childhood kitchen, which felt like wearing someone else's skin, and she was holding a folder. Not photos, not old letters, a folder of paperwork. She set it down like it hurt her too, and she started to walk me through it. There were the medical bills, a frightening stack of them past due. And there was a form, one page tabbed with a little sticky arrow where I should sign that would make me the responsible party for his care. And I saw, as I read, financially responsible alongside it. "Colleen already quit her job to do this," my mother explained in the patient voice you use with a child who's being difficult. "She had to, and now there's no income from her. And your father's disability is nothing, and we need someone with a good steady job, honey, someone reliable." Someone reliable, she meant me. She meant sign here and take on the debt and be the reliable one forever, because that had always been my role. And death was no reason to update the org chart. And then I saw it, and it's the detail I'll never forget, the one that told me exactly what I was to them. That newspaper article, the one about my award, my program, my face, someone had printed it out and stuck it to the refrigerator. Not in pride, I knew this family, there was no pride in it. It was up there like a price tag, like a resume pin to the fridge to remind everyone what the asset was worth. They had not found their daughter. They had found a solvent, competent, guilt-adjacent woman with a steady paycheck and a nurse's license, and they had pinned her market value to the fridge with a magnet. My mother slid the pen across the counter toward me. "It's just a signature," she said, "right about here." I picked up the pen, then I picked up the folder, and I did the thing that has saved my life more than once. I read it slowly, line by line, the way I read a doctor's orders before I follow them. Because following orders you haven't read is how people get hurt. My mother watched me read, and I could feel her getting nervous, because in that family nobody read things. You just signed where the arrow pointed and trusted that handling it was somebody's job. I set the pen down without signing, and I said it calmly in my nurse voice, the one I used to deliver news people don't want. "I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to give Dad the best death I know how to give, and I know how to give a good one. I'll do it for free with my own 2 hands for as long as he has. That's a gift, and I'm choosing to give it." My mother started to smile, relieved, thinking she'd won. And then I finished, "But I'm not signing this. I'm not taking on the debt. I'm not quitting my job. I'm not moving back. I will care for him. I will not be built for him." The room went very still. My mother's face did a complicated thing, the relief falling off it replaced by something colder. And I watched her recalculate in real time, watched the machine look at the tool that had just declined to be picked up all the way and start behind her wet eyes to hunt for a new grip. I had refused the paperwork, but I'd been in that house before. I knew they wouldn't stop at paperwork. They'd just find something softer to squeeze. It was Colleen who found the softer thing, and she found it in my coat. I'd hung my coat on the hook by the door, the way you do in a house you grew up in, muscle memory older than the grudge. And that evening I came down and Colleen was standing at the bottom of the stairs holding the boarding pass. My return flight, the folded paper with the date on it, unfolded now in her hand. And her face was doing the thing our father used to do, going flat and hard right before the storm. "What is this?" she said, though she knew exactly what it was. "You bought a ticket home." I said evenly, "That is my home. I'm flying back on the 19th. And that's when the whole house came for the ticket, just like I told Adam they would. Colleen's voice went up. My mother came out of the kitchen. "He's your father," Colleen said, shaking the paper at me. "He's dying, and you've got a plane ticket in your pocket like you can't wait to leave." As if a woman who'd flown across the country to sit with her dying father was the villain, because she also intended one day to leave. As if the ticket proved I was still the same selfish Faye from the story, when really it proved the opposite. That I could love him all the way to the end and still not disappear into them. I crossed the room and I took the boarding pass out of my sister's hand gently, and I folded it back along its creases, and I put it back in my coat over my chest. And I felt something settle in me, cold and clear and almost like peace, because they had done exactly what I'd predicted. They'd gone for the ticket. That's how I knew all the way down that I'd been right to leave. On the 16th day my father started to go. I knew the signs before anyone else in the house did because I've watched them arrive 100 times, the mottling in his feet, the breathing that changed its shape, the way he pulled inward, sleeping more, surfacing less, the body beginning its last quiet work of shutting down. I also knew something else, the kind of thing my trade teaches you that families never see coming. There was likely one more window left, one last stretch of lucidity common near the end, a clearing before the fog closes for good. Maybe an afternoon, maybe only an hour when he would be awake and himself and able to speak. After that there would be no more words from him, only breath, and then not even that. So I did what a good nurse does, I told the family. I said gently, it's close now. If there's anything anyone wants to say to him or hear from him, it needs to be soon. He may have one clear window left and then he won't be able to talk anymore. And I watched them gather, my mother and Colleen and a couple of aunts who materialized from around the county. All of them clustering toward that front room for the moment they'd been waiting for. The deathbed scene, the reconciliation, the closing of the book. And I stood at the edge of it, and I made myself admit the thing I'd been hiding from since the airport. I wanted the window too, not for the family, for me. 6 years I'd told myself I was done, that I expected nothing, that I'd grieved them already. And here I was hatting that I was hopping, that in his last clear hour my father would finally say he was sorry. The window opened the next afternoon, grey light coming flat through the front room curtains. The whole family pressed into a space that used to hold a couch and a TV, and now held a dying man, and everyone who wanted something from his last clear hour. My mother sat closest, holding his hand. Colleen stood at the foot of the bed with her arms crossed over herself like she was cold. The aunts hovered near the wall and me. I was in the corner in the worst possible spot, the spot I'd spent my whole life in, occupying both roles at once and hatting both. I was the nurse watching his breathing, timing the window, ready with the medicine. And I was the daughter standing off to the side, waiting like a child to be seen. My father's eyes opened and they were clear, clearer than they'd been in days. He looked around the room slowly, taking us in, landing on each face. And there was a hush so complete I could hear the rented bed motor and the tick of the radiator and my own heart. This was it, the window, the one clear hour. Whatever he said now was the last thing he would ever say. And everyone in that room knew it. And everyone was braced for it. My mother squeezing his hand, Colleen's jaw tight, the aunts leaning in. And his gaze travelled across all of them, past all of them, and came to rest on me in my corner. He wet his lips. He was going to speak, and I realized I had stopped breathing. My father looked at me from the bed with his last clear eyes, and I stood in the corner with 6 years of silence in my chest and a boarding pass in my coat and a stupid, undying 16-year-old hope in my throat. And he said the last real thing he would ever say to me. It was not "I'm sorry." I want to be precise about this because I've replayed it 1,000 times and it never changes. He gathered what strength he had and he looked right at me and he said, "Stay. Move back home. Take care of your mother when I'm gone. You're the strong one, Faye. It's what you're for. It's what you're for, not who you are. What you're for. Even now, even here in his last clear hour with everything else stripped away, the truest thing my father could find to say to his dying daughter was a job assignment. He wasn't cruel about it. That's the part that undid me. He said it almost tenderly, like he was giving me something, like being the strong one was a gift and a crown, and not the yoke it had been my whole life. He genuinely did not know the difference. He had never known the difference. And in my head, clear as a struck bell, I heard the whole month ring out, 89 calls, and not one of them was "I'm sorry." And I understood that there had never been going to be an apology, not from him, not from any of them, because in their language what he'd just said was the apology. "Come home and be useful" was the closest to "I love you" that this family had ever learned to say. My mother took it as her cue. "You heard him," she said softly, and Colleen was already reaching for the folder on the side table, sliding it toward me across the blanket, the pen on top of it. "It's what he wants, Faye. His last wish, just sign it." So there it was, the whole choice laid across a dying man's blanket. On one side, the thing I'd wanted my whole life and had flown across the country still secretly hopping for, a place in this family, a father's approval, the sentence "come home" that a lonely part of me had never stopped wanting to hear. All I had to do to take it was pick up the pen, sign the folder, quit my life, dissolve back into the machine, be the strong one, be what I was forever. And on the other side was everything I'd built, and everything I'd become, and the quiet, clear knowledge that if I signed, I would be proving with my own hand that the whole ugly thesis of my childhood was true. That my love was a thing you could summon by needing me badly enough. That I was only ever worth the handling I could do. I looked at the pen, I looked at my father's face waiting, and I chose. I did not pick up the pen. I set my hand over my father's instead, warm over cold, and I said it quietly to him and to the whole braced room in the steadiest voice I own. "You're right," I said to Colleen without looking away from him. "Family isn't something I get to quit, but love isn't something you get to bill me for." And then I did the only thing that was ever really mine to give. I did not argue, I did not sign, I did not run, I nursed him. I checked his pulse and read his breathing, and I told my mother gently to lower her voice. And I turned the lamp down so the light was kind. And when the pain crossed his face, I gave him the medicine at the right time in the right dose. And I held his hand through the long, slow hours as the window closed and his breathing gentled, and finally near midnight stopped. I gave my father a good death with my own 2 hands, freely, because I chose to, not because I owed it. And in the same hour, holding his cooling hand in that quiet room, I let go of the apology that was never going to come. I buried my father and my last hope of belonging to them both at once in the dark. He died a little after midnight, and the house filled up with the sounds it makes. My mother's weeping, the aunts on their phones, the machinery of a family closing ranks around a death and already around the questions that come after it. The funeral, the arrangements, the house, the debts, the endless handling. I felt it start to reach for me, that current, the assumption humming in the room that of course Faye would stay now. Of course Faye would manage all of it. The funeral and the paperwork and her mother, because he'd asked and he was dead. And now it was sacred. I stood up from the bed. I straightened his blanket one last time, the way I do for every patient, a small courtesy for the body that housed a person, and I took my coat off the hook and I reached into the inside pocket and I took out the boarding pass. The 19th, 2 days away. Colleen saw it in my hand and she moved to the doorway, blocking it, her face wild. "You're leaving, now, he's not even cold and you're leaving." And I looked at my sister and I did not raise my voice because I never do. And I said the truest thing I had. I came to give him a good death, I did that, the rest was never mine to fix. She said my name like a curse. My mother said something about how could I, the aunt stared, and I did not sign anything, and I did not stay, and I did not explain myself again. I stepped past my sister, through the front room door, across the entryway, and out the same screen door I'd sworn I'd never walk through again. This time I was walking the other way. 2 days later I flew home. Same route backwards, the fields giving way to the mountains, the flat grey country dropping behind me for the last time. And somewhere over Kansas, with the boarding pass finally used and worthless in my pocket, I understood the thing I'd flown 1,000 miles and lived 6 years to understand. I had thought all this time that leaving had made me free, that walking out at 27 was the end of it. But it wasn't, not really, because I'd spent every one of those 6 years still defining myself against them. I left because I refused to be used, which meant I was still secretly organized around being used, still turning like a planet around that one dead star. Even my freedom had been about them. What happened in that front room was different. In that room I gave everything I had to a man who never once said he was sorry, and I gave it because I chose to. And then I left because I chose to. And neither the giving nor the leaving was about what I owed or what I was owed. That was the first genuinely free thing I'd ever done. That was 8 months ago. I'm home in Colorado in the life that's mine. I still work the last hours, the hard ones. Last week I stood behind Jenna, she's not so new anymore, while she sat on the edge of a stranger's bed and held a dying woman's hand and kept her voice low and kind and did it right. All of it, because I taught her how. And I thought that's the chain going the other direction for once. I spent my childhood learning that love was a job you could be fired from. Jenna's learning that you can give everything to a person and still keep yourself. That's the only inheritance I care about passing down. Colleen still texts. Every few weeks there's the estate and the funeral costs, and now it's Mom. Of course Mom's getting older and someone reliable should really. And the word "oh" still shows up in almost every message, worn smooth from handling. The machine didn't die when my father did. It just turned, looking for the next one to run on the way it always will. But here's what changed, the only thing that had to. I answer on my terms now, or I don't answer at all. The phone doesn't own me anymore. When it lights up my chest doesn't drop, it's just a phone. They didn't call when I was drowning. They called when I could swim. And it took me 33 years and a deathbed to stop needing the water at all. To stop needing to be drowning or saving someone or useful or needed, just to believe I was worth keeping alive. Adam asked me the other night if I regret going back. I thought about my father's cold hand warming under mine in that quiet room, the good death I gave him because I wanted to and not because I owed it. No, I said. I don't regret it. I finally know the difference now. You can love someone all the way to their last breath and still refuse to be the debt they never meant to let you pay.